Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a very great honor and pleasure to welcome all of you here today. We have a very tight schedule and a long day. On behalf of the EastWest Institute and our partners, CNS and the Global Security Institute, we'd like to welcome you for our day where our purpose is to review the progress that has been made since Secretary General Ban Ki-moon's 3 years ago to this date in this forum set out a bold and important 5-point plan, which has been much discussed and much debated. And we're honored, Mr. Secretary General, that 3 years later you return and we see where we stand and where we need to go. At that time, in 2008, I personally promised the Secretary General that the EastWest Institute would hold itself to the benchmark that he set in his speech. We have worked to do that, convening with the cooperation of the Kazakh government, Kazakh mission, and other missions here, an important effort of a nuclear discussion forum. The report is in, everyone has the report when it's here. This is really a laboratory made up of nuclear weapon states, non-nuclear weapon states, and those that are parties or not parties of the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. I will make my remarks very brief, and we'll get into just describing very briefly what we're going to do later today. But I think all of us realize that these kinds of fora are crucial to a chance to speak frankly and to bridge seemingly intractable divides. The report of our proceedings of this event will be published and widely disseminated immediately next week, and we look forward to moving forward. I'd now like to move on and call our partner, Jonathan Granoff, who's going to explain a little bit about how the day will operate, and then we'll turn over to Chairman Francis Finley.
Thank you very much. Well, the day will operate by having a plenary session here this morning with 2 panels, and then in the afternoon there will be breakout sessions. It's in your programs. And if you haven't pre-registered for them, please feel free to attend any of the ones that are attractive to you. You will note that they track as best as we possibly could the 5-point proposal that the Secretary General set forth, because that was the commitment that the Global Security Institute and the EastWest Institute made 3 years ago when the Secretary General seized this very important leadership on this issue, that we would indeed, with our programs and our network, promote, advocate, and educate people on this extremely important 5-point agenda. What has struck me about the leadership of the Secretary General on both the nuclear issue as well as the issues of climate change and poverty is his emphasis on the conjoining of the moral imperative with the practical imperative, and his emphasis consistently on the need for higher levels of multilateral cooperation. And if there's anything that the EastWest Institute distinguishes itself in doing, is promoting effectively multilateral cooperation, and that indeed is the commitment as well of the Global Security Institute and its programs, Parliamentarians for Nuclear Non-Proliferation and Disarmament. And there are parliamentarians here from all over the world who are working on that 5-point proposal, the Middle Powers Initiative chaired by Ambassador Richard Butler, and the Bipartisan Security Group directed by Ambassador Robert Gray. It is our commitment, Mr. Secretary General, to continue to follow your leadership in this regard, and it is an extreme honor for us to have you address us here today.
Every institution is fortunate to have a real leader. The EastWest Institute is no exception. Our chairman, Francis Finley. Francis.
Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's my very great honor and pleasure to introduce the Secretary General as our keynote speaker for this day of discussion, which has as its objective the addition of momentum to our united efforts to eliminate nuclear weapons. Mr. Secretary General, your leadership in this field, as in so many other areas of peace, conflict, and human security, is admired around the world. We at the EastWest Institute hold you in high regard, especially for your 5-point plan for nuclear disarmament announced 3 years ago at a similar forum at the United Nations on United Nations Day, hosted by our institute along with our partners today, the Global Security Institute and the James Martin Center for Non-Proliferation Studies. The momentum since then has been palpably evident, to which all in this room can attest. In December 2009, the Prime Ministers of Japan and Australia presented the report of the International Commission on Nuclear Non-Proliferation and Disarmament, Eliminating Nuclear Threats, a Practical Agenda for Global Policymakers. The Commission made a strong plea for the continued delegitimization of nuclear weapons. Among the more significant of the report's recommendations were the setting of a medium-term minimization point target to be reached by 2025 of a world with less than 2,000 nuclear warheads, a more than 90% reduction at current nuclear arsenals, a suggested approach to moving forward the issue of a weapons of mass destruction free zone in the Middle East, and a plea for early movement by the nuclear-armed states on refining their nuclear doctrine to limit the role of nuclear weapons, on those states giving unequivocal assurances that their nuclear weapons will not be used against non-nuclear weapon states, and for a rethinking by all states of existing approaches to extended deterrence. And in March 2010, the United States and Russia negotiated the New START treaty that will significantly reduce their nuclear arsenals. In April 2010, 47 states committed to strengthen nuclear security and reduce the threat of nuclear terrorism at the Nuclear Security Summit in Washington, D.C. Also in 2010, the 5-yearly NPT Review Conference unanimously adopted an ambitious 64-point action plan on non-proliferation, disarmament, and peaceful use of nuclear energy with a view to the total elimination of nuclear weapons. There are also numerous significant civil society initiatives to advance nuclear disarmament. For example, the Nuclear Security Project of NTI, Global Zero, the Middle Powers Initiative, the Nobel Peace Laureate Summit, and the United Religions Initiative, are but a few. However, we should not ignore the insight of the prestigious Stockholm International Peace Research Institute in its 2011 yearbook in addressing the cuts in the arsenals of Russia and US under the New START treaty. The yearbooks noted that both countries currently are either deploying new nuclear weapon delivery systems or have announced programs to so do, and appear determined to retain their nuclear arsenals for the indefinite future. A similar situation of modernizing or expanding nuclear forces may be seen in other countries with nuclear weapons. Mr. Secretary General, your 5-point plan from 24th of October 2008 served as a necessary foundation for the progress made by states in the 3 years since then. Your strong voice and moral authority on this issue are still needed. May I now invite you to address those gathered here today to participate in our day of discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Francis Finlay, co-chairman of the EastWest Institute, Mr. John Mroz, President and CEO of the EastWest Institute, Mr. Jonathan Granoff, President of the Global Security Institute, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to meet you again. As you know, today is October 24th, United Nations Day. We met 3 years ago. This is my third time. This is quite a meaningful reunion, and I thank you very much. Let me begin by saying what a great pleasure to meet you all. This is, again, the third time I have spoken at a conference organized by the EastWest Institute. At the first, in 2008, I launched a 5-point proposal for achieving a world free of nuclear weapons. And thank you very much for your strong summit commitment and support, and raising the awareness and raising the support at the international community. Then, as now, I believe we are at a crucial moment. I believe the time was right to inject new momentum into the disarmament agenda, to build on the energy and ideas of so many around the world who have challenged us to act, and to act now. Today, I want to thank the EastWest Institute, the Global Security Institute, and the James Martin Center for Non-Proliferation Studies. We have today a fine opportunity to take stock and look forward. Now, we all know that the experts have been talking for decades about banning nuclear weapons. And yet, here we are. Tens of thousands of nuclear weapons still remain. New ones are being designed and built every day. And to what purpose? Even those who believe in this noble cause too often speak of nuclear disarmament as a distant dream, even a pie-in-the-sky ideal. As a Secretary General, I want to bring disarmament down to earth, not a pie-in-the-sky ideal. Instead of hearing the word disarmament floating in the air, I want to see disarmament effects on the ground. This is what inspired my 5-point proposal for action. First, I call for leadership by the nuclear weapon states, including good faith negotiations on a nuclear weapons convention. I also called for talks on deep and verifiable reductions in the largest nuclear arsenals held by the Russian Federation and the United States. Second, I encouraged nuclear weapon states to pledge that such weapons would never be used against the non-nuclear states. I also urged the Security Council to hold the summit meeting on nuclear disarmament. Third, I called for new efforts to bring the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty into force and to begin negotiations in the Conference on Disarmament on a fissile material treaty. Disarmament must be rooted in legal obligations. Fourth, I called on all nuclear weapon states to report their disarmament efforts to the UN Secretariat. Without real transparency, there can be no real accountability. Fifth, I stressed the need to work toward the elimination of other weapons of mass destruction and to develop new controls over missiles, space weapons, and conventional arms. 3 years on, we have seen some concrete progress. In September 2009, the Security Council held its first ever summit meeting on disarmament and non-proliferation. Last year, the Russian Federation and the United States signed the New START Treaty. Meanwhile, support for a nuclear weapons convention continues to grow. In 2010, the annual General Assembly resolution for negotiating such a convention gained the votes of 133 member states, the most ever. And last year's 2010 NPT Review Conference adopted a final document that acknowledged support for the Nuclear Weapons Convention. Civil society groups have gathered millions of signatures for this cause. We have begun to lay the groundwork for a conference on establishing a zone of free nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East. As you are already aware, I have already appointed the facilitator and host government of Finland. Finally, we have seen global action to improve nuclear safety and security. Last month, in the aftermath of Fukushima disaster, I convened a high-level meeting on nuclear safety and security at the General Assembly. I hope it can serve as a stepping stone to other efforts, including 2012 Seoul Nuclear Security Summit. Ladies and gentlemen, today I would like to outline my thoughts for how to advance this progress. Most immediately, the world is expecting a deeper reduction in the largest nuclear arsenals. This should include limits on both non-strategic nuclear weapons and non-deployed weapons. And by weapon reduction, I mean weapon destruction. There is an indispensable role here for international verification, especially over the disposition of fissile materials from dismantled weapons. We need a significant improvement in transparency. Too little is known about existing stockpiles of weapons, fissile materials, and delivery systems. The UN's Disarmament Repository offers a useful tool for states in encouraging greater transparency. Next year's first session of the PrepCom for the 2015 NPT Review Conference offers an opportunity to strengthen accountability in fulfilling the disarmament commitments made at the 2010 Review Conference. We must also strengthen the rule of law in disarmament. And this would include elaboration of the legal obligations needed to achieve nuclear disarmament, including the contents of a future nuclear weapons convention. I would also add the possibility of another Security Council summit meeting and ratification of the protocols to all the regional nuclear weapon-free zone treaties, especially in Central Asia and Southeast Asia, along with the determined efforts to establish a WMD-free zone in the Middle East. The Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty should be brought into force without further delay. And of course, we cannot advance rule of law issues without the Conference on Disarmament, the world's only multilateral negotiating body for disarmament. For too long, this vital body has been paralyzed by differing priorities. It is stumbling into irrelevance. This does credit to no one. It must fulfill its responsibility to act. As we look ahead, we must keep our eyes fixed on our universally agreed ultimate goal of general and complete disarmament. All of what I have proposed is achievable, and none would impair the inherent right of individual or collective self-defense as affirmed in the Charter. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a full agenda, and we cannot achieve it alone. The future of nuclear disarmament rests on many shoulders: nuclear weapon states, the international diplomatic community, and of course, a robust collective effort by civil society. What impresses me most is not the sheer number of disarmament groups that are making a difference, but their diversity. Over the past 3 years, our bonds have grown even stronger. I have seen the passion of the arguments and the power of the stories, from the former Soviet nuclear testing ground in Semipalatinsk to Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where I heard the first-hand from the Hibakusha survivors. In Mexico City, I attended one of the largest gatherings of disarmament NGOs ever. And these groups are expanding their networks and their use of social media, as seen in the efforts of international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons, Global Zero, and many others. We can and we must continue this momentum for progress. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, exactly 1 week from today, the world will welcome the 7 billionth member of our human family. We are 7 days from 7 billion. What kind of future will that child have? We know that the world of tomorrow is shaped by the decisions we make today. A world free of nuclear weapons is a concrete possibility. Let us realize that dream so that 7 billion people can live in peace and security. Thank you very much for your commitment.
Mr. Secretary General, on behalf of everyone here, may I thank you for your inspirational remarks. Just as you did 3 years ago, you've laid out a roadmap and plan for the future few years and given a focus for our discussions for the rest of today. So thank you very much for finding the time to join us today. We greatly valued your presence. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Then you gave us our marching orders. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary.
Great. Yeah. Wow.
Excellent.
Wow.
Thank you so much for joining us.
That was fabulous. Yeah. That really was simple and substantive. Indeed. Indeed.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.